So I was planning on writing a post on Reddit about this, and then I thought it's maybe better to explain it to a camera than to start typing it all out, because I'm gonna have to show you some stuff anyway. So this is gonna be a video about Marc Rebillet's music and which elements are often attributed to his success that I think don't matter that much, and which parts of his performance are often overlooked, but in my opinion, make a very big part of what he does. So let's start with the beginning. The gear that he uses, in my opinion, doesn't matter at all. He uses a Boss RC505 to do his looping. A lot of artists use a lot of different loopers and can do exactly the same, so you don't need to go out and buy the Mark I version of the RC505, because apparently that is the thing to use, and that's the only piece of gear to do that. That's not true. The way I'm doing it, I'm using Ableton Live to do this, and I have an Ableton Push to make it a little bit more away from the computer, and that's also fine. You can do this with any looper that you think fits well. The cool thing about that is that you are also not restricted to the restrictions that the looper brings you. So if you want to do it in your creative way, just go with what fits best for you. And I think what Mark does fits very well with the RC505, because that is just the way that he started out. So it's not the looper. It's also not the keyboard that he uses. It's also not the fact that it is a specific brand. If you have watched some of Mark's videos, you will see that he used to have an M Audio Axiom, if I'm not mistaken. Then that was followed by an M Audio Code 49, and then that one was followed. Nowadays, he plays a Leases, I think. All of those keyboards have 49 keys. So 49 keys is what Mark is comfortable with playing, and he uses octave switch to switch octaves. This is an Arturia keyboard. It's not an M Audio keyboard. It's also not an Alesis keyboard. It doesn't matter what hardware you use. What is an important factor, though, is that you use an actual MIDI keyboard and not a MIDI piano. For those of you who don't play both instruments, this might be a surprise to you, but a piano, an actual hammer-weighted piano, is a very, very different playing style with your fingers and a very different type of force feedback than when you have like one of these spring-loaded keyboards. And I'll show you an example of a third thing that I think does matter, and Mark has said this in many interviews over already. High-quality virtual instruments are really what takes the cake here. When you look at the instruments that Mark is using, he made a video at one point, I'll link to it in the description. He made a video about several plugins, VST plugins that he uses. And Scarby makes virtual plugins. They're very, very good. And for his bass parts, like the raw, scratchy bass guitar sound, that's the Rickenbacker plugin. One of the things that Mark does with that plugin is he uses the muted notes of the instrument. And I'll show you an example of how that works. Give me just a second. Okay. Okay. So one thing that Mark does a lot when he plays this instrument is he plays muted notes by just like very lightly tapping the keys. And this is why it's important to have a spring-loaded keyboard rather than a piano. If you take a hammer-weighted piano and you do this, you're not going to hear anything, because the force of your fingers, the speed at which you're doing it, is not enough to actually hit the key. You need a spring-loaded keyboard for that. The playing technique that I'm trying to demonstrate here is the following. So the also, a nice thing about this plugin is when you hold your sustain pedal down, you can't see it on the camera, but if you hold your sustain pedal down and you play a note, it slides up. And the speed of the slide depends on how hard you hit the second note. So if you have, then I push it very slightly, it goes up there. If I hit it very hard, it goes very fast. So the force with which you hit the key is also an important thing here. The plugin also calculates whether it's possible to do that slide on that string. So there's a lot of tips and tricks on the Rickenbacker plugin that you can use. So what Mark does with like that, that's really what creates the feeling. Then there's also the electric piano, so the Rhodes sounds, the Wurlitzer sounds. They come from the EP88 series of Scarby, and we're going to take a peek at those next, because there's a few tricks that Marc does with those plugins, not necessarily linked to those plugins, but they are very important to his playing style. So let's take a look. So one technique that Marc utilizes a lot is he takes minor seventh chords. Let's say that this is a song that's in A minor. So you take the A minor seventh chord, you leave the, in the upper chord you leave the A out, so you just have this chord. It looks like a C major, and in essence you could argue that it is, but it's not a C major because the A is down here. What you then do is you take this C, you move it up here. This is still A minor 7. So then he switches like between A minor 9, omitting the third note, and then switching between those notes. And this works equally well with the clav plugin. So thanks for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something. And see you next time. Peace.